knows too much. So ladies and gentlemen, it's really my honor and pleasure to introduce really a friend and a colleague many years ago, Mr. Mark Chandler, Head of International Trade and Commerce for the City and County of San Francisco.
Thank you, James. 8 mayors. For those of you who don't know, I'm the only guy on the agenda today who actually has two of my former bosses on the agenda. I worked for Jim Wonderman, of course, and I worked for James. And usually my job working for James was correcting numbers, like I just said, City and County of San Francisco, and on behalf of Mayor Breed. I'm here for 2 roles today, and the first is representing Mayor Breed, who unfortunately is out of the city this weekend, and to forward her special thanks and appreciation, Ms. Fong, to you, and to all of those who have put on the event today, the Bay Area Council, the Sister City Committee, Peking University for being here, the Consulate, and others for putting on this important event. Because this important event really symbolizes not just today, but years and years of cooperation and friendship that have made San Francisco and the Bay Area, we think, the gateway between the United States and China. So thank you so much on behalf of the Mayor. I'd also like to bring the Mayor's greetings to Ambassador Wong and the Consulate. Having you in San Francisco, having the Consulate in San Francisco is one of the jewels of our city. You guys do so much, and you and your colleagues, your predecessors before you, have built such strong ties into our community that enhance all of the work that we do with China. So, Ambassador, thank you for your support. Thank you to all your colleagues at the Consulate also. I'm going to be very brief today. It's hard to follow people like the Ambassador and the President and so many others, but to kind of echo for a few minutes what Mayor Schaaf talked about this morning, which is we're here celebrating 40 years of relationships and friendships and looking to the future, and my role for about 3/4 of that 40 years, working for Jim, working for James and many others, has been at the sub-national level. And I think as much as we talk about the issues at the national level, which of course are critical and key, and which all the speakers have noted today, I'm a strong believer that the subnational ties are strong, and that over the 40 years, it has been the subnational ties that have made such a difference in our society. And I'd like to just share with you some of the examples of what we've done in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and how these are so important to this friendship between China and the United States. First, I'm going to highlight the San Francisco-Shanghai Sister City Committee, which is one of the sponsors today. It was founded 40 years ago because of the brilliant foresight of then Mayor Dianne Feinstein, who visited China in the fall of 1979, met with Mayor Wang Daohong of Shanghai, and came away with an agreement that created the first sister city in February of 1980, the first between the US and China. As we noted, there are now hundreds, but San Francisco and Shanghai was the first. Originally with Mr. Gordon Lau, many of you may have remembered Gordon, followed by Walter Fong as our chairman, and for the last quarter century, James has been the chairman of this fantastic relationship. Why is that important? Well, from 1980 to the present, there's been over 300 projects of exchange between San Francisco and Shanghai. Many of them are small, many of them are government to government. We're sharing emergency services, we're sharing programs in sustainability, we're sharing transportation ideas. But there have been some major programs that have made a difference. In the 80s and the 90s, it was under the Sister City Committee that they ran a program called the Shanghai Business Management Program, the BMP program, which at that time took the best and the brightest of Shanghai, both from government and from the commercial sector, and literally trained them, brought them to San Francisco. They worked in companies, they worked in the government, they worked in hotels in San Francisco, and created, frankly, the first managerial class in Shanghai. Most of our graduates of the BNP program moved on to incredible levels of importance in Shanghai. Many are retired, but many are still there today. And so it shows a program that was done city to city created long-lasting connections, long-lasting relationships, which have benefited both of our cities. Because of that, so many businesses in San Francisco, so many nonprofit organizations in San Francisco were able to make ties and get into Shanghai that would have been virtually impossible otherwise. That program actually received many awards for its depth and for its innovativeness. We've done many, many other things. We've had soccer teams, basketball teams, art exhibits go both ways, performance exhibits, tons and tons of trade missions that have gone both ways. In 1995, James and I worked very hard on the first ever Shanghai Week in San Francisco, whereas Shanghai, under then Mayor Xu Guangdi, came to San Francisco with over 500 people. We did business conferences, we had cultural events, we had sporting events, etc. We then reciprocated in 1998 with Mayor Willie Brown with San Francisco Week in Shanghai and showcased the best and the brightest of San Francisco to Shanghai. We were very involved with much of the fast development that all of you have seen in Shanghai. The Sister City Committee was very involved with the stock exchange in Shanghai, for example, not just in its physical structure, which actually was designed here in San Francisco, but with its infrastructure and with the social structure, if I may say that, of the stock exchange by the connections that we made with then the Pacific Stock Exchange. So my point here is these subnational ties can be very, very, very important. In 2010, many of you may have attended the Shanghai World Expo, Shubo Wei, right? I made my Mandarin's not so good. There was a time when the United States was not going to participate in the 2010 Expo. And the city of San Francisco and our Sister City Committee actually stepped up and met with our friends in Shanghai and said, do not worry. Even if our country doesn't go, San Francisco will be there. We will represent the United States in Shanghai at the Expo. Luckily that changed. We went, we had a fantastic San Francisco week at the Expo, but luckily Hillary Clinton, when she became Secretary of State, changed our country's direction, and the United States had a very large and functioning pavilion and presence at that. I think most importantly is since 1979, when Mayor Feinstein made that first visit to Shanghai, every mayor of San Francisco has visited Shanghai and Beijing, the only country and the only cities in the world that I can say that about. Mayor Agnos, Mayor Jordan, Mayor Brown went multiple times to China. Mayor Newsom went multiple times to China. Mayor Lee was in China maybe more than San Francisco, but especially in Shanghai. And again, as Mayor Schaaf demonstrated with her review and her thoughts about visiting China for the first time, you can imagine what a difference that made in San Francisco and our programs, our projects, and our connections when every one of our mayors was there personally. Now, that's the Shanghai side of it, but I'd say in the city of San Francisco, one of the other important things is we had many, many other subnational connections with China. And back in the 90s again, when James and I were working together, we worked with groups such as the province of Shandong and presented their first ever trade show at Fort Mason Pavilion. We worked with Beijing, the city of Beijing, and we continue actually to work very closely with the city of Beijing, and presented their first ever trade show in the United States at the old Showplace Square Pavilion. I worked with the province of Hunan to do Hunan Week in San Francisco back in the early 2000s, and Zhengzhou and the cities and the history and the businesses came to San Francisco for the first time. Many of the cities in Guangdong province, such as Shunda and Zhuhai and Dongguan, have done major events through the sister city, or not through the sister, through our city connections. Recently, we've done a lot with Wuhan and Hubei because of their technology interest, and with Shenzhen and its connection here to Silicon Valley. Just a few weeks ago, I was involved with the Nanjing tourism office here, and it even has gotten to the private sector, where we have this company that some of you may know called Maotai, which was first introduced to the United States at San Francisco in 1915, at the World Fair at that time, who now comes annually and does their major American event on Maotai in San Francisco. I attend, I do not drink. I'll let you know that. My point is here, it is the subnational ties that often are overlooked by our national governments, but yet continue to be of such great importance. And again, Jim, you pointed out the Bay Area Council's unique role that you're playing by tying our business communities together. The city of San Francisco, under then Mayor Newsom, now Governor Newsom, created our China SF program specifically to tie our business communities together. That was 11 years ago. We were the first city to do that. Now many cities in the United States are doing that. Through the Bay Area Council, through China SF, through our travel association, through our airport, we have offices across China now. These are what the subnational units such as San Francisco are doing, and which I think in the long run make an incredible difference, regardless of what the national politics are saying at this time. So I'll be very brief, but I just thought what I'd like to do is maybe say, we're talking about the 40th anniversary in the future. Let's compare 40 years ago as I, as a municipal worker, would have been versus today in terms of China. 40 years ago, I couldn't even get to China. It was very, very hard and very, very difficult. Today, because of the work that we've done at the city and through our airport, I can walk a few feet here to San Francisco International Airport and get on a nonstop flight to Beijing, a nonstop to Shanghai, a nonstop to Qingdao, a nonstop to Guangzhou, a nonstop to Wuhan, a nonstop to Chengdu. On 4 different airlines, and if I include San Jose, 5 different airlines with Hainan Airlines. So the connectivity just physically is amazing compared with 40 years ago. There were no Chinese tourists 40 years ago. Now in San Francisco, Chinese tourists are our #2 country for tourism, #1 in terms of spending. I think about the communications. There was no communications between us and China 40 years ago. When I worked on Mayor Agnes's trip to China in the early 1990s, we were so happy because we had this brand new super technology called a fax machine that allowed us to write something on paper, and if we stayed up late enough so that the office in China was open, because when they were closed, they turned off all the electricity in the office, we could fax something to China. And that was amazing to us, and once a week we would make a call to work on those logistics because that's all we could afford, was 1 phone call a week because it was so expensive. Today, when I go back to work on Monday morning, it's very likely that my colleagues in the Foreign Affairs Office, the Waishuban, in Shanghai, in Wuhan, in Chongqing, in Chengdu, in Guangzhou, in Beijing, will have sent me an email, or maybe when I get home tonight and I turn my phone on again, they'll probably call me via WeChat, because I have a WeChat channel, and that's the way we're talking now. So we have this instantaneous communication that did not exist, and which again promotes these subnational person-to-person relationships. We look at all the offices, and I talked about that. We had none 40 years ago or even 20 years ago. Now there are so many San Francisco and Bay Area organizations that are in China, and vice versa, that again we're able to bring these people together. I think the thing I like most is, let's compare Shanghai and San Francisco from 40 years ago. There was really nothing about either city that was located there. If you go to Shanghai today, you'll see a very tall building in Pudong, the Junmao building. As I said, the Stock Exchange building, and many others. They were designed here in San Francisco. You'll find artwork on the river's edge that came to Shanghai from San Francisco. If you're here in San Francisco and you visit our Asian Art Museum, the director of our Asian Art Museum, Jay Xu, is a son of Shanghai. If you visit the San Francisco Ballet, you've seen Wai Wai Tan dance, the premier ballerina in our ballet, another daughter of Shanghai. That was inconceivable 40 years ago. Who knows what 40 years will do from there. So that's just a bit of the San Francisco experience, but I think like Mayor Schaaf said, and I'd like to reiterate, it's about relationships. That's what can make a difference, and I think while we're worried about these national issues and we have to work hard on them, we need to continue to focus on the subnational contacts, whether it's at the city level, the agency level. I think that's what most of you are doing here in this room today, because I have seen that truly makes a difference. It truly builds those people-to-people ties. And again, Ms. Fong, thank you for bringing this together and for your amazing work over the last 40 years and so much that you've done, and to the other organizations. Thank you very much.